Please take your seat. Sabiiti, Mulema, Posiano, we welcome you to this session. The panel has agreed that you're given 1 hour of presentation and you take us through your work. After that, we shall have a question and answer session from the panelists. It is now, take it at 10:40, so at 11:40, I'll stop you. You can go on.
The director of postgraduate school, professors around, doctors, and other academicians, ladies and gentlemen, protocol observed. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The topic is community radio's broadcasting services and socio-economic development in Western Uganda, a case of selected communities in Bara district, Uganda. Those are my supervisors, Professor Olach Meza and Dr. Regis Zombeide. And the flow of my presentation is going to be as follows. The order of presentation is going to be as follows. First of all is the background of the study, followed by problem statement, purpose of the study and objectives, unit of analysis, literature review, methodology, historical and philosophical aspects. Then I talk to you about the results, contribution, the new knowledge, conclusion, then recommendations and areas of further research. Background. This study is all about the contribution of community radios towards socio-economic development in Western Uganda, and particularly in selected communities in Bara district. It is not possible to get the right definition of the community radios because there are so many that have come up with different ideas. But for the purpose of this study, a community radio is defined by someone who said that it is for the community, by the community, and serve the needs of the community. And that is by Uganda Broadcasting Policy of 2011. The historical background. The issue of community radios began when the collapse of the Radio Uganda started because of the budget issues. Because the budgets could not serve the requirements of running a radio, which was covered in all the regions in the country, and it had issues about programming and coverage of the area. And by doing so, it will not serve the purpose of socio-economic development in terms of literacy levels, which had gone to around 69.4%, and housing materials, of which we find that 42% were of what we may call the same permanent houses, and which could not serve the purpose of economic development. And about 1.9% was discovered by on unemployment rate. So it means that UBO's report of 2006 was looking at how the radios were actually capturing the economic development within the communities. And the Radio Uganda would not do the same. It is during the time of that collapse of Radio Uganda, that Radio Kagadi in Chibale Community Radio was established in order to serve what was needed by the communities. And irrespective of the socio-economic development trends which were identified at that time, it will remain less investigated as to whether community radios were actually serving the purpose the communities wanted. Theoretical background. So in order to investigate the effect of community radios, broadcasting services on socio-economic development in Western Uganda, we looked at democratic participant media theory, and the assumption was that the participant media theory contended as the promotion of self-reliance in communities as possible in the right relevant local information as broadcasted in the communities, meaning that community radios were giving people rights or communities to get the right information, and by getting the right information, it will actually help them to improve on the socio-economic development. So by doing so, the theory challenged the uniformity of other radios, which were looking at generalization of what other people would want, but professionalize it as follows. Conceptual framework or conceptual background. A community radio was defined as one run for the community by the community. Allowing the community to contribute within the programming. The demographic increases and improved health, income and educational and cultural transformations, employment and housing conditions are not yet satisfied by the community radios as we may expect it to be. Because according to the policy of community radios, which is supposed to educate, inform, and entertain, they are not transforming what the community is expecting from them. So in spite of the above, poor housing conditions still stand at 56% in communities, according to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, which is a high percentage when we look at economic development. In Mbara district, at least 1 out of 10 households with members of about members aged 5 years and above were still having less than 2 males, which means that health-wise, they are not actually improving, and they are not fitting very well for the children to go and maybe have better standard of living. And employment was standing at 17%, of persons aged 18 years and above, meaning that the out-of-school rate or dropouts was still very high. If you look at how the community radios they are serving them, then we wouldn't be expecting that percentage to still be there. And yet the radios have been working towards socioeconomic development. So we expected the standards to be above those percentages. Contextual background still continues, and we're saying that based on what they are doing as community radios within the society, the majority of about 60% of the households are still having a radio as the main source of information, meaning that community radios is a good thing within the communities. But when you look at the contribution towards socioeconomic development, then it doesn't match with the existence of those radios, because 60% is a big number, because if 60% can have radios and listen to them, make a contribution as far as socioeconomic development is concerned. So this study does set the investigation to find out what broadcasting services does toward the socioeconomic development in Bara district in particular. Problem statement. So however much in any social setting, there is a manifestation of socioeconomic development, there are other institutions that contribute to that. And part of that is the community radio, and of which we are trying to find out what actually community radios have done within selected communities in Bara district. However, it remains questionable in Bara district, where 90% of members are still residing in detached houses. So that is a big number that poses a question whether community radios are actually contributing to socio-economic development. And the same report of the Bara District local government of 2017 says that 65% of school dropouts was still existent, in spite having them having community radios. Almost in every community having a community radio, and they are still having that drop rate of school going students of 65%. And yet, when you read in other areas, you find that community radios, community radio broadcasting has influenced socio-economic development to a bigger percentage. So we're wondering what is happening in Bara district where we have community radios, and yet the socio-economic development indicators are still low. So, solution of how the services can contribute to socio-economic development can be depicted from the community broadcasting model, which I developed, that is going to help how the community radios should be broadcasting in terms of content, in terms of coverage, in terms of language, so that people can understand and get the right information to do the right activities that can lead into socio-economic development. Purpose of the study aimed at examining how community radio broadcasting services can influence socio-economic development among the communities in our district. Specific objectives of the study: one was to examine the extent to which community broadcasting services have contributed to socio-economic development of communities in Bara district. Two, assess the effect of community radio health broadcasting services on radio listenership among communities in Bara district. And three, to analyze the relationship between the community radio listenership and socio-economic development among communities in Bara district. It is followed by the hypothesis. Unit of analysis is broken into two parts. At a group level, we focus on community radios producers or the general managers of the community radios. That is the programmers, the producers, editors, and other managers. And at an individual level, I looked at radio listeners because each radio has a list of radio listeners. They even have an association that registers radio listeners, and each radio has a list that you can depend on. Then scope of the study looked at the content in terms of health, programming content, agriculture and education, broadcasting content. And in terms of time, I looked at the period between 2013 and 2018. And geographically, I looked at Mwezi, the Kayensho, and Kamukuzi sub-counties in Barabas. Literature review on the theoretical framework. It was this study underpinned the new growth theory of economic development, which insists that the new growth theorists, particularly by Roma, that economic growth is as a result of increasing returns through use of knowledge rather than labor and capital. According to Hassan and Abdul, who listened to stimulate and improve awareness about knowledge and solution of the community radio broadcasting, and found out the problems that were associated with community radios. And according to Alam, who reported that radio broadcasting as aspect of build work, the content gap was not identified within the study, and the quality was dissolved during the study, and the recommendations will be filling the gaps. According to Ranga, who assessed the role of community broadcasting in promoting small families and family planning among men in Uganda, the author found out that the community radio broadcasting was interactive and provided an opportunity for dialogue and feedback, meaning that there should be a dialogue or communication between the listeners and the broadcaster of the radio, community radio, and the listeners for the communities, so that they can share the type of content that can be delivered. However, the program still exists in the Ranga study program in mobilizing conceptual framework. According to the topic, community broadcasting services development is a dependent variable. However, we still have another variable, which is the extraneous variable, independent and dependent, and the third one, and we're trying to find out how it is affecting the outcome or the results of the relationship. The research gaps were identified during the study, and according to the done on the overall, there was a uniform direction that radio broadcasting in regard to economic development, that it is true that I mentioned community radios are actually promoting economic development. In health, agriculture, and education, in one way or another, they have a bearing in terms of economic development within communities, within other areas, and even in Bangladesh. However, It is not only theoretical but also knowledge and methodological and contextual gaps that were found in existence. And in the reviewed studies about the knowledge gaps, equally were evidenced in reviewed studies and failed to report the link between community-led broadcasting and socioeconomic development. Also, what was evidenced within the reviewed literature were the content gaps, and we found that several of them do not bring out clearly the different aspects of socioeconomic development. And it was the responsibility of this study to clearly identify what were those specific aspects as far as socioeconomic development is concerned in the selected communities in Bara district. So these were addressed by the recommendations and the recommendations that this study came with at the end of this presentation. Methodology. As far as the paradigm is concerned for this study adopted a positive research because it does not only emphasize on observable phenomena, but to get facts and also permits explanations for such an observed phenomena within a particular context, in this case, community development or socioeconomic development within those communities in Bara district. The research design for this study is a cross-sectional survey which employed both quantitative and qualitative approaches. The study population. The target population of the study constituted radio listeners within Ugandan communities aged 18 years and above. So both male and female. Of the radio listeners, radio program is on radio, and those radios or community radios which are aired and listened within the communities of Mwezi, Kamukuzi, and Nyakaejo sub-counties in Bara district. And the study population size of the formation of these communities was actually according to cumulative at the end of the presentation, where the focus group discussions and interviews are taking place. On data collection instruments, for purpose of the study, both qualitative and quantitative tools were used, which included the interview guide, questionnaires, and focus group tools or instruments. On data quality management, for this study, validity of the research instruments, content quality index was used, and of which the 0.8 content quality index was attained, and it was proved to be valid since it was beyond 0.7 as the recommended figure. The reliability of the research instrument was also done, and alpha has been pretty much alpha coefficient was applied, and we came up with a figure of 0.8, which was confirmed valid because it was above, it was between the range of 0 to 1, and that was the recommended value according to the standards. The data processing, preparation, and analysis. After data was edited, coding was done, and it was entered into the computer for analysis. And the coding of all data gathered from the field was done, preparing for the study variables, be laid out for better analysis. So the analysis of data involved quantitative and qualitative, and based on what was collected using the questionnaires and interview guides from the respondents, it was basically the best results that can be based on for the quantitative data. I said that both qualitative and in terms of quantitative data for social sciences, version quantitative presented the tool for the variance and variance analysis for frequency counts, and also bivariates were also done, and cross-tabulation analysis was also done. And in order for the hypothesis, here's on correlation analysis of two variables were also run to get the best results. And finally, multiple regression analysis were conducted to get the path, the right path of the last conducted examination for the better results that they determined, and come up with a conclusion that whether there was a relationship between community radio broadcasting and socioeconomic development. Qualitatively, data was analyzed when a comparison was done between the findings and the studies were done before. And in order to make a qualitative conclusion, the hypothesis tested the interview results, assumptions, and suggestions of the participants played a great role for us to come up with the right analysis and determine that whether there is a contribution or relationship between the two variables or not.
You have used 20 minutes.
Okay. So still on analyzing the quantitative data, the recording was done, and the F4 computer software was used to come up with the right voice and interpretation of the messages to be correlated and related with the previous reviews, to come up with what people think about broadcasting and how it has contributed to economic development. And also the grounding analysis in data was meant to make the analysis. So grounding theory was also applied to make the research variables background and strong enough for analysis. The socioeconomic development and cultural environment on which a study was predominantly founded by using the analysis of both qualitative and quantitative was to identify that actually what people are saying or the respondents was actually rhyming with what the managers were saying, because the objectives of the programmers or the managers of the radio would actually rhyme with what the respondents were saying in the field in terms of impact and even what they thought would be right answers on the questionnaires. Ethical considerations were put in place during the study, and the data was submitted from the also had to request for voluntary consent from all the participants. I went to Black Research Ethics, made some changes, some and some technology to get the data for the fieldwork aspects of this study. The concept of this study entails broadcasting services not for profit and which are owned and controlled by particularly the community and the association, meaning that it must be looking at how the communities or the community radios are owned by owning the radios and how they are contributing towards broadcasting. So according to Ali and Conrad in 2015, the community radios should be looking at how it is owned by the community, serving the needs of the community, and how the community is participating within the broadcasting. The historical trend of the community radios, how did the community radios come into existence in Uganda? As I had said before from the background, that it started from the decline of Radio Uganda when the budget was a constraint. And here, they are saying that the invasion started during the Macon period of 1898, up to date when it has risen into a public radio, and which is generalization of the Generation of Public Broadcasting Act of 1967. The theoretical aspects of the community radio looked at the media aspects of theories, and one of them that I looked at is hypodemic needle theory. The hypodemic needle theory says that the impact of the broadcasting impacts on listeners and changes the behavior of the listeners, meaning that whatever they listen on the radio is taken to be the truth and is actually believed in it to change the behavior, meaning that it can change the way they do things and improve on their standard of living. The agenda setting theory is the second one, which proceeds that the media tells the audience what is important. Media, through coverage of ideas and events, they have influence on the public regards. The public regards as important and what is not important. So when you look at the agenda setting theory, it looks at what the communities or the listeners are intending to listen is what they take to be the truth of the radio that is aired, or the program that is aired, and they take it to be the truth or not the truth. So communities believe in the radios more than what other sources of information. So media is very important within the communities, meaning if the content of the program is good, then it helps the communities to do the right work and improve on the development. On philosophical underpinning of this study, the study looked at programmatic imperative, which appreciates against the background of the technical and other shortcomings of the national radio, meaning that the background of the community radios also contributed a lot towards the establishment of the community radios. The target sample size of the study and the response rate, it was actually 96.5%. So this response rate, since it was above 60%, was considered sufficient enough for the study. Objectives of result number one, objective one and results of the same objective. So objective one, I'm not going to look at the results, what I found out from the analysis. And I did not have the tables within this presentation because I had to condense it within the time. And the tables had legend, which talks about how important the results were and how they are rated. And the first one, which looks at between 4.2 and 5, was very high. 3.4 to 4.1 was high. 2.6, 3.3 was average, and then 2.5 was low, and then 1.0 to 1.7 determined the results. The table 5.2 indicated an overall high level of community radio health broadcasting among residents, with a result of 3.7, meaning that it was high, meaning that it was high and it was contributing towards socioeconomic development. Table 5.3 also showed a 3.7, which means that it was also high and had an effect on socioeconomic development. Table 5.4 had a result, almost all the tests were coming with the same range of high, and meaning that the impact was realized within the economic development by the communities. On the qualitative response, radio, Western and digital, through agricultural broadcasting, many people, or the respondents, had given gave us feedback, and the recordings were done, the narratives were done, and were considered to be of relevance within our analysis. So through listenership or listening of the more presentations on Western and radios, it was considered, according to the listeners and responses from the communities, that radios were contributing to their well-being and the development within their communities. Then the correlational matrix, regression, and regression models results of the communities. These are the results as follows. The table 5.6 indicated that health broadcasting with R of negative 0.002 and a small p of 0.9, meaning that the relationship between health broadcasting content towards socioeconomic development was actually not there, and the significance was also very low. So the health broadcasting content that was broadcasted or aired by those communities had a significant relationship on socioeconomic development. But on the regression model results, on table 5.7, it shows that health, agriculture, and educational broadcasting explain 15% of the variation in socioeconomic development, with adjusted R squared of 0.155, and then 84% of the variation was conducted by other factors, but not considered under this model, meaning that when you look at the predictors of these factors, was that These agriculture and educational broadcasting were also part of the contributors of socio-economic development. Then educational broadcasting with beta of 0.4 and a small p of 0.0 had a statistically positive effect on socio-economic development, meaning that there was a great significance on socio-economic development as far as educational broadcasting was concerned, because it came out clearly that people were listening so much on educational broadcasting for educational content other than other broadcasting services. So this is sufficient evidence that would tell you that community radios were actually contributing to socio-economic development within the communities. Objective 2, community radios listenership among residents in Bara district. Table 6.1 shows that most of the residents in Bara district often listen to the programming or broadcasted on the content of the broadcasted on the different community radios. Health-related programs were 36.4%, agriculture-related programs 35%, entertainment program 19%, and religious program listening, or what they were listening on the religion was about 8.8%, meaning that the highest listened program was about health-related and agriculture-related. That's where the interest of the communities was. On correlational results, table 6.2 showed results where R is equal to negative 0.009 with a small p of 0.8, meaning that the relationship between the variables is actually negative, and however, it is negative on the relationship, but the significance is actually small, but it is shown that there is a significance within the socio-economic development. Results equally show that on agriculture, the R is negative 0 and the small p is 0.4, still showing that the relationship between the two variables is actually negative, it's not there, but it shows that there is a significance between the two variables. So meaning that if the content maybe is right and people contribute what they want within those programs, then it can still show the relationship between the two variables. However, a weak positive but statistically significant correlation between health broadcasting and frequency of the radio listening, R is equal to 0.1 and P is equal to 0.015. It also shows that there is a weak positive but significant correlation between educational broadcasting and community radio broadcasting, because we have results showing an R of positive 0.2 and small p of 0.0, meaning that there is a positive relationship between the two variables, and there is a positive significance between the two variables. So educational broadcasting is actually listened to more, or is considered more contributing to economic development other than other variables or other content. Regression of results, table 6.4, it shows that community radio broadcasting, that is health, agriculture, and education, have a 0.5% of variation and adjusted R squared of 0.6 within those elements, that there is also a contributing factor of socio-economic development, but are not significant predictors in the extent of group membership, meaning that the groups that were listening to those community radios were not actually because of those programming contents, but they also had other factors of why they formed the groups to listen to those community radios. And the results show neither of the different forms of community radio broadcasting have a significant to the extent of which residents belong to the listening groups. So the listening groups that were formed for different community radios were not as a result of those content. They had other factors that actually influenced them to form those groups. On regulation results, table 6.5, which we are talking about broadcasting services of health, agriculture, and education. It has a 3.7 variation and participation with adjusted R squared of 0.037, meaning that there are also some level predictors that can determine the relationship between community radio broadcasting and economic development. And then 96.3% of the variation was counted by other factors not considered under this model. The results, however, on educational broadcasting shows a better value of 0.17 with a smaller p of 0.08, meaning that there is a significant positive effect on frequency of listening radio programs. So the number of times that communities listen to the community radio programs actually influence the level of economic development. So there is adequate evidence that has been shown within the results that community radio broadcasting and frequency listenership among the communities contribute toward socio-economic development. Objective 3.
You have 12 minutes. You need to explain your contribution to knowledge.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe you should move to that part.
So let me just summarize this and move to the contribution to knowledge. That on correlation on objective 3, it has a positive R and a positive P, meaning that there is a positive relationship between the variables, that meaning that there is a socioeconomic development, which is determined by community radio broadcasting. And then, even if there is a weak positive significance correlation, but there is a positive R of 0.06 and a positive P of 0.3, meaning that throughout these variables, the correlation results show that within this objective, there is a significant relationship between the variables, meaning that community radio broadcasting is actually contributing positively toward the socio-economic development within specific communities in Bara district. I'm going to read the regression results and go straight to Let me talk about the functional relationship between community radio broadcasting and radio relationship in relation to socio-economic development within the communities. So this study established that community radio broadcasting, and then a structural modeling was done, a hypothesized model, and try to see how the relationship is determined from the independent variable, how it is determining, how it is affecting the dependent variable, which is socioeconomic development, and what other factors can be affecting the results of socioeconomic development, which is expected within the communities. So the structure inclusion model was done. The full structure inclusion modeling was done, and which included all the variables within the modeling. And it's actually showed that economic development, and also education was also part of it. Education, agriculture, and health the three broadcasting services was so much influencing the socio-economic development. However, also other factors looking at listenership and participation of the listeners was also part of on how economic growth can be achieved. So this full which factors actually determine significantly to socioeconomic development. So it's a substitution model was done to come up with what exactly those factors or what those programming services that are actually determining the socioeconomic development of the communities within those communities in Bangladesh. So it came out to show that education broadcasting economic development, and that means that when have structured very well the development of the community, because it has an effect also on how the economic development can be achieved. Also, the listening frequency of the communities also has to be increased, because the more you listen to the radio, the more you are influenced by the content, and the way you understand what you need to do, what is right and what is wrong. Through all that, then I had to come up with my contribution, which is based on the gaps which were identified. So the gaps identified within the study and from the literature, both content and methodological gaps, led me to the contribution of the model, which would be a solution to the problem that other communities were not benefiting from the broadcasting. And if they can use this model, then they can easily give the right content, have participation of the communities, and end up attaining socioeconomic development. This model is called sustainable conscious operational radio. It is to be applied on the community radios to change the way they are doing their work and then help the community to grow. So when you look at arrow number 1, it starts with the community radio broadcasting, of which we have the broadcasting services. In this case, we have health broadcasting, agricultural broadcasting, and education broadcasting. Now, those broadcasting services by the community show that the radio listenership behavior has also changed. Because how do you change it? It's the content that changes the behavior because they have interest in it. So once the behavior has changed, then it means that the conscience of participation of the community or the communication between the listener and the broadcaster has also improved. That it is easy for you to attain economic development when you go through those steps. Alternatively, you can also go through the arrow number 5, which means that the sustainable conscious operational radio enterprise can also achieve through centralized execution of the system. So the system shouldn't be monopolized by only the managers of the radio, but the communities should also contribute towards those processes so that they can be followed and fit the community. The model is also personalized, and this is how it is operationalized. When you look at one where there is radio program, the radio, each community radio has a right to work out service policy, and that service policy must fit within the policy created within the score or the model that has been created, which is followed by the radio. And then they must create a community radio operational procedure, which is actually in accordance to what the community is also contributing. There is a harmonization between the community and the managers. Then there is also a community radio operations which have changed, because what have been done is just based on what the managers want, but this time is looking at what the communities want and what the radio wants. So it is the community radio, the individual radio operations which have featured that have suited within the new model, and then by doing so, they will have to achieve the socio-economic development that is desired by the communities. This model was tested in Kabare and Kabarore, where Kabarore and was the control group was in Kabarore, and the uncontrolled group was in Kabare, where the control group, the highest response shows a 45%, meaning that the sustainable conscious radio operational communication enterprise actually contributed so much to development, and where the list was 14%, of where they said that radio listenership behavior leads to socio-economic development. On the uncontrolled group, which is in Kabare, the highest group said that 38% said that sustainable conscious radio operational communication enterprise leads to socio-economic development. And then the list said, which is 14%, said that the conscious participation communication leads to socio-economic development. What these two groups say is that the control didn't know what was happening, and uncontrolled actually was aware what was being measured. So when you look at the two results, what came out from the two groups, it tells you that even if they are not rhyming in the results or outcome, they still prove that there is a contribution by community radios toward the socio-economic development. Conclusion, based on what we have seen in the results, it is revealed that there is a relationship between community radio broadcasting and socio-economic development within communities if the right content in programming is done, if the communities have participation within the programming, and if the listenership frequency has been influenced, increased, and people will get the right information and will judge what is right and what is wrong. Based on the study and results, I came up with some recommendations. Number one, we need holistic community participation within the radio programming process, because if you look at what the qualitative feedback we're getting from the listeners is that however much they like community radios, but they feel they are neglected. So they need to be included within the participation so that they feel what is being aired on radio is actually what their interest is. Because if you look at those communities, some people are very much concerned with health, others are concerned with agriculture, but you may find that the time allocated on those programs is actually not enough, and they run commercial radio. Two, community radios need to focus on the quality of their output. They need to filter so much on the content. And then whatever is aired out is actually what the communities will regard as quality output of the program. So they need also number three to reward the established radio listenership groups, because those groups do a lot of work in terms of influencing the listeners within the communities. So those groups, if a community radio integrates them, then it means that they will have to switch their interest from one radio to another one, and then they will end up not attaining what their objective is.
1 minute.
So, Uganda Communications Commission should enforce community broadcasting policy, because the policy there. But the community radios are on one. So the Uganda, their policy such that community radio communities. And lastly, the number 5, there is need for encouragement of the application of more entrepreneurial principles, because the owners have turned these community radios into source of revenue or source of funds. Yet the community radios are supposed to serve the communities. So they need to look at other ways of getting funds to run those enterprises. Other areas for further research, because I didn't exhaust everything, other people will need to look at larger samples of the community radios, different forms of radio stations, because they are different in forms. And then we need to look at how ICT is affecting socioeconomic development. If ICT has come back and is applied in community radios, how is it affecting the socioeconomic development in the community? I've done one publication. Those are the photos for the interviews and the focus groups.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You may take your seat. Our members, you have listened to the presenter. It's now time for question and answer session. First stage.
Thank you very much, the chairperson of this event session. I would also like to thank you very much those who had a long journey with the candidate, and also the internal examiner, and all of us here present. I thank you, the candidate, for the elaborate presentation that we have had this morning. I would like to pick up, I'd like to ask you to pick up your thesis. Good, thank you. Let's start with chapter 1. Page number 1. Under the historical background, I would like you to read the first paragraph to us to hear.
His perhaps non-governmental organizations by donors.
That is adequate. Let's go to page 2, paragraph 3. I would like you to read that paragraph, just a bit of it. Starting with in order.
In order to promote development in the communities, non-governmental organizations took the role as key players in establishing community radios for communities that since the communities lack the resources, expertise, and competence in terms of skills to establish and run.
Thank you very much. Now, when you read those 2 paragraphs, there seems to be contradictory. One, you clearly tell us that community radios is associated with the collapse of non-governmental organizations. In the history of Uganda, we clearly know that non-governmental organizations have never collapsed. and the number continues to grow. And when you go to the website of the registered NGOs, you have over 14,000 of them, and the number is growing. So, what do you mean by the collapse of the non-governmental organization? And in what ways then do this collapsing non-governmental organization again play a significant role in establishing community radio? Is something about which I need to get a little bit of information from you. You can note down the question. Again, systematically, I would like us to go to your theoretical background. Your main focus is community radio and the services they provide on socioeconomic development in Western Uganda. And at the end, we saw you mentioned a number of them. The Radio West, and there is a Vision Radio, and the third one is, yes. Where are they in your background? And actually also in your results? Did you study the and the outputs of this specific 3 radios that you said you have taken and presented the results and emanating from what they do as far as the services on socioeconomic development in Western Uganda is concerned? So I'd like to link this together with the result. Let's go on. I will leave the issues of the objectives to the internal reader. I would like to capture other core issues. I would like to take you to theoretical frameworks. You have identified a number of them: the two-step flow theory, agenda setting theory, democratic participation, input-output model for community radio. That is in chapter 2. And when we go to chapter 4, historical and philosophical aspects of the study, again, here you focus on a number of theories. And when you go to page 60, 61, 62, 63, you find almost over 11 theories that you have listed. Theory plays a crucial role as far as fathering knowledge is concerned. The reason why we look at theory as far as our study is concerned is we borrow from them because these are tested theories, and we use them to enable us to further ideas. So we link the theories to our methodologies so that it is easy that we are able to identify knowledge gaps, and we also analyze the results to further new knowledge. So what is the link between these theories, first of all, you have identified, and the model that you have developed, which is on, which you claim to be on pages 125 to 129. I actually look at chapter 8, which the title is Conclusion, Recommendations, and Contribution to Knowledge, as a standalone chapter, which does not have concrete link with the other chapters that you present within your thesis, and we see a model emerging by itself. So, what is the source of the information here from which you develop the so-called model standing by itself? I would like to take you to the time frame, which is 1.92, the period between 2013 to 2018. You said this is the period in which you you made the study. We do not see it reflected in the results presented. We do not see the systematic output starting from 2013 to 2018. So what for did you put this period in your methodology presented to us? What issues emerge between this period, and what are the concrete results that are presented as a result of this time period that you said is an issue for which I would like to seek an answer. Allow me to go to the methodology just a little bit and raise one specific question. If you look at page 34 to page 35, the title is Research Design, and I read it through. Honestly, I do not see your research design. Was it a mistake or was it omission, although the subheading stands as it is? So what actually is the research design that you have provided? I would like to take you to chapter 5 and chapter 6 combined. Those who have the dissertation, the thesis, I would like you to peruse through. Just to peruse through, and I raise this to the candidate. Look at 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. You see raw data. Raw data, several pages presented to us, unanalyzed, critical reflection not seen. Let's go on. 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92. Raw data given to us. Analysis required, critical presentation required as a result of that. 94, 96, etc. You can see all this for yourself. Raw data presented to us for examination. Was it deliberate that you give examiners raw data, raw information for an examination? Page 125, conclusion, recommendation, and contribution to knowledge. Where is the conclusion in this chapter? And where is the recommendation? I was not able to see. Chapter 9, conclusion again and a recommendation. You did indeed state something in your presentation about conclusion. Honestly, I have not seen the conclusion of this study emanating systematically from the results of this study. This, for me, is a clear indicator that the results have not been analyzed and have not come up with a clear result. That is the reason why there is no conclusion. What do you say about this? Is a question that I want to raise to you. Of course, you have read a number of recommendations to us. Where did you get those recommendations from? I stop here.
Thank you, Doctor. Candidates, it is your time to respond to the queries that have been raised.
Thank you, Doctor, for your concerns. I'm going to respond to some of them, and others have noted. You raised an issue of NGOs that never collapse. So what I meant in this statement is that there are so many NGOs in Uganda that after operating as briefcase NGOs, and there have been concerns by the government in even reviewing their licenses that they are not doing their work. Instead, they are getting money from the funders to fulfill their own needs. So once they are not renewed, then it means they have collapsed. So most of them have been left out in the exercise of renewal, giving licenses, and others are coming on. Then when you talked about the issue of where I raised the issue of NGOs also contributing or playing a role in socio-economic development, yes, true. Those, we have some genuine NGOs, like Vision, World Vision, which are actually known for what they are doing, and they have actually done a lot on behalf of the government. And they have actually helped some of the community also to make sure that the message is delivered to communities. And they have done a big role as far as development is concerned within the communities.
Did you really pick his question on that? It was the contradiction, yes, the contradiction that they are collapsing and at the same time contributing to socio-economic development, working with
yes,
community
Doctor, I said it is true they are collapsing, but not all of them that are collapsing. But those which are remaining, like World Vision, I've said they have done a good job as far as socio-economic development is concerned. However, I can go back and rephrase the statement. But what I meant is that most of them have started in Uganda, they have collapsed, they have been left out when it comes to renew their licenses. So meaning that they are not doing the right job.
So does not renewing the license mean closure? Mean rather collapse? Why don't you consider it as closure?
I will change that phrase.
I don't mean so. I don't mean you take closure. But to pick from what he's asking you, you need to re-examine your submissions.
I'm not a bit. Then on why focus on Western radios and where are they? These radios are in the Mbara district. And it's true they have objectives, which I read. They have their vision and mission. But why I was actually recommending in my recommendations that Uganda Communications Commission has to go down and they foster policies is that they have those objectives, missions, and visions, but they are not reflected in what they are doing. So what we got on the ground is that what they have as their vision and mission is actually not participating.
Mr. Sabiiti, did you study this radio station? And did you find, what did you find when you studied? And if you studied them, where is it in the thesis that you have reported? This is the question.